I was being brought to set in a wheelchair. Like I couldn't walk that far. So I had to tell everybody.
There are moments in Hollywood that remind the world why we fall in love with storytelling in the first place. And then there are moments that go far beyond the screen, beyond the cameras, beyond the carefully scripted lines, moments that cut straight to the human heart. What Christina Applegate recently shared about Ed O'Neill after their long-awaited reunion is exactly that kind of moment. It is raw. It is real. And for millions of fans who grew up watching the Bundy family tear each other apart on television with a grin, it changes the entire picture. Christina Applegate has never been someone who hides behind polished Hollywood answers. Even in the most difficult chapter of her life, she has spoken with a candor that her peers rarely match. But what she said about Ed O'Neill after seeing him again, after reconnecting with the man who was her television father for over a decade, was something that even the most devoted fans were not fully prepared to hear. Because what she revealed was not just about a reunion between two former co-stars. It was about a bond that never actually broke in the first place. To understand what Christina's words about Ed truly mean, you have to understand where Christina is right now. In August 2021, she publicly announced that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The disease had already been quietly reshaping her life for months before the world knew about it. She had been filming the final season of her critically acclaimed Netflix series Dead to Me when her body began sending signals she could not ignore. By the time the diagnosis was confirmed, the path forward looked nothing like the one she had imagined. Multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system. It does not follow a polite or predictable schedule. For Christina, it has brought significant changes to her mobility. She now walks with a cane. She has spoken openly about the fatigue, the cognitive fog, the days when her body simply does not cooperate with her intentions. These are not minor inconveniences. They are life-altering realities that require daily renegotiation of what is possible. And yet Christina Applegate has refused to become invisible. She has spoken at length about her diagnosis in interviews, on her own podcast, and on social media with a frankness that has become something of a lifeline for others living with the same condition. She has talked about the grief that comes with a diagnosis like this, the mourning of the future you thought you would have, the slow process of building a new relationship with your own body. She has not dressed any of it up. She has not performed resilience for an audience. She has simply told the truth. That decision, to remain present and vocal even when it would have been far easier to retreat, says everything about who Christina Applegate is. And it is precisely the kind of courage that makes what she said about Ed O'Neill after their reunion land with such tremendous weight. When Married with Children premiered in 1987, Christina Applegate was 15 years old. She stepped onto that set as a teenager entering one of the most deliberately provocative sitcoms in the history of American television. The show was built to offend. It pushed against every boundary that network television had quietly agreed to respect, and it did so with complete and gleeful intention. And right in the middle of that chaos was a 15-year-old girl playing a character who was, by design, a constant target of jokes about her appearance and her intelligence. Ed O'Neill was already in his early 40s when the show began. He was a trained theater actor who had come up through the legitimate stage before Hollywood took notice. He understood the industry in ways that a teenager simply could not. And from the beginning, something in him recognized that the young woman playing Kelly Bundy needed more than a professional working relationship. What developed between them over the 11 years that Married with Children ran was something that former cast members and crew have described in consistent terms over the years. Ed was protective of Christina. Not in a controlling way. Not in a way that undermined her confidence or treated her as someone incapable of navigating the world herself. He was protective in the way that a genuinely good person is protective when they see someone they care about in a situation that requires care. He paid attention. He was present. He made sure that when things on set pushed toward territory that was uncomfortable or inappropriate for a young woman surrounded by adults, someone was paying attention. Christina has acknowledged over the years that growing up on a television set is not the ordinary childhood that it might appear to be from the outside. You are working alongside adults from the time you are a teenager. You are navigating professional dynamics and industry pressures that most people do not encounter until they are decades older. The people you spend your most formative years with are your co-workers before they are your friends. And the show itself was one that regularly put a young woman at the center of jokes that a teenager probably should not have been absorbing as her daily professional reality. Ed O'Neill, by all accounts, understood this. And he chose to do something about it. Not loudly. Not in a way that drew attention to itself. Simply by being there. By the time Married with Children aired its final episode in 1997, Christina Applegate had gone from 15 to 26. Those are not ordinary years to spend alongside another person. Those are the years when a human being becomes who they will be for the rest of their life. The relationships formed during that window do not fade the way adult friendships sometimes can. They settle into the foundation. Christina went on to build a genuinely remarkable career after the show ended. She transitioned into film with work that demonstrated a range far beyond what Kelly Bundy had required. She earned critical recognition for her dramatic abilities. She won a Tony Award for her performance in the Broadway revival of Sweet Charity. She built a television career that stood entirely on its own, separate from the shadow of the show that had launched her. Ed O'Neill went on to find perhaps his greatest cultural moment yet in Modern Family, a show that introduced him to an entirely new generation of viewers and earned him recognition that reframed everything that had come before. He had, in so many ways, the second act that Hollywood rarely delivers. But through all of it, neither of them ever quite lost track of each other. The relationship that had formed on that set did not require constant maintenance to survive. It was simply there. A thread that ran quietly through both of their lives regardless of what else was happening. They would reconnect. They would check in. They would appear at events together, and the warmth between them was not something that needed to be performed. It was already there before the cameras pointed in their direction. When Christina and Ed reunited in the context of reconnecting with the Married with Children cast in the years following her diagnosis, those who were present described something that was impossible to stage. The ease between them. The way a look or a half-finished sentence communicated everything that needed to be said. The particular quality of a relationship between two people who have known each other across decades of real life, not just television schedules. Christina has spoken about what it meant to see Ed again with a particular clarity that comes when life has reminded you, firmly and without apology, that time is not guaranteed. She has said that there is something about going through something like an MS diagnosis that strips away the small talk. You stop navigating around the important things. You say what you mean because the reason not to say it has become less convincing. What she said about Ed, about what his presence has meant to her and continues to mean, was rooted in that clarity. She talked about him not as a former co-star or a colleague from an earlier chapter of her career. She talked about him the way you talk about someone who was there when it mattered. Someone who chose to show up not because the situation demanded it but because that is simply who they are. She has described him, in various interviews and public conversations, as someone whose consistency has been one of the steadying forces in her life. Not in a dramatic or demonstrative way. In the quiet, reliable way that actually means something when the larger things become uncertain. Following their reunion, Christina did not hold back in describing what Ed O'Neill has meant to her. She talked about the specific texture of his care over the years, the particular way in which he always seemed to understand what she needed without requiring her to spell it out. She talked about the years on set when she was too young to fully appreciate what was being given to her, and about the way that understanding arrived later, as it often does, when life provided enough contrast to make the gift visible. She talked about the fact that when her diagnosis became public, and the world was watching to see how she would handle it, Ed was among the people who reached out not with the careful, measured language of someone uncertain about what to say, but with the directness of someone who knew her. Someone who was not going to let the weight of the moment create distance between them. Christina has a gift for describing emotional reality without sentimentalizing it. She does not reach for the easy warmth of a scripted speech. She says the specific thing, the detail that makes it real. And what she said about Ed after their reunion was full of those details. The particular way he looked at her. The things he said that were not about her illness at all, which was itself a kind of gift. The way being around him again made her feel like herself in a way that some of her newer relationships, however genuine, cannot quite replicate. Because he knew who she was before she knew who she was. That is a different kind of knowing. She spoke about the father-daughter dynamic that had existed between them on set and about the way it had evolved over the years into something that defied easy category. It is not exactly a friendship, though it is that. It is not exactly a mentorship, though it began as one. It is the specific relationship that forms between two people who have lived through an unusual amount of real life in close proximity and come out the other side still genuinely glad that the other one is in the world. The question of a married with children reunion has circled through entertainment news for years. Every few months, someone raises it again. Every few months, the conversation bumps up against the realities of scheduling, of creative vision, of what such a thing would actually look like and whether it could possibly measure up to the nostalgia it would be asked to carry. But the context has shifted meaningfully in recent years, and Christina's diagnosis is the undeniable center of that shift. Any reunion now carries a weight that the original show never had to consider. It would not simply be a nostalgic revisit to a beloved piece of television history. It would be a statement about what these people mean to each other, about what they are willing to do for one another, about what the Bundy family looks like when the people behind it have been tested by real life and chosen to remain. Ed O'Neill and the rest of the original cast have been consistent and public in their position. Whatever a reunion looks like, it is built around Christina. Her needs, her capacity, her comfort with what the production requires. They will not do it without her. They will not replace her. They will find a way to tell a story that includes her on terms that work for her, or they will not tell it at all. That position, held publicly and without apparent hesitation, tells you something significant about the relationships at the center of this story. These are not people performing loyalty for a press cycle. These are people who mean it. Christina has said that knowing this has been important to her in ways that go beyond the question of whether a reunion actually happens. The willingness itself is the thing. The fact that the people she grew up with on that set have looked at where she is now and said without qualification that she is the one they are doing this for, that is not a small thing when you are navigating a chronic illness that regularly reminds you of what you cannot control. There is a particular kind of courage required to speak honestly about gratitude. It sounds paradoxical, but it is true. Gratitude in its genuine form is vulnerable. It requires you to admit that you needed something, that someone gave it to you, and that you are changed because of it. For someone with Christina Applegate's specific kind of strength, the strength that shows up as wit and directness and a refusal to perform softness she does not feel, that kind of honesty takes something. What she shared about Ed O'Neill after their reunion was, at its core, an act of that kind of courage. She was not telling a charming story about a beloved co-star for the entertainment of an audience. She was describing the architecture of something that has held her up, quietly and without asking for recognition, across nearly 4 decades of a life that has included extraordinary highs and, lately, challenges that would have justified a great deal more bitterness than she has allowed herself. She talked about what it means to have someone in your life who knew you when you were still becoming yourself and who has never confused who you are with what you are able to do at any given moment. That distinction, between who you are and what you are capable of on a given day, becomes enormously important when you are living with a condition that changes what you are capable of on a given day. To have someone who sees you clearly regardless of that fluctuation, that is something that cannot be manufactured. It is earned over time, through presence. Ed O'Neill's presence in Christina Applegate's life has been that kind of thing. Quiet, consistent, real. And she finally said so, plainly and without decoration, in a way that made clear she meant every word. Married with Children will always be a significant piece of American television history. It arrived at a particular cultural moment and said things that other shows would not say, in ways that other shows would not dare. It made audiences uncomfortable and then made them laugh at their own discomfort. It was genuinely subversive in the way that only things that appear to be doing something else can be. But the legacy that Christina Applegate and Ed O'Neill carry from those 11 years is not primarily about the show's place in television history. It is about what happened between two people on either side of a significant age and experience gap who chose to treat each other with genuine care over an extended period of time. The show was the container. What grew inside it was something else entirely. Christina has said that the version of herself that exists today, the one with the courage to be public about her diagnosis, the one who refuses to disappear, the one who can stand in front of an audience using a cane and make a joke that makes the room laugh through its tears, that person was shaped in part by what she learned from watching Ed O'Neill navigate the world with integrity. She was 15 when she first watched him do it. She has been watching for 37 years since. What she finally said about him after their reunion was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying close attention. But hearing it stated plainly, without the layers of deflection that both of them might once have preferred, was something that mattered. Not just to the fans who have followed both of their careers across decades, but to Christina herself, who has spent the past few years learning, sometimes against her will, that saying the true thing out loud while you still can is not a luxury but a necessity. Christina Applegate is not finished talking. She has said as much. Her podcast, her interviews, her willingness to remain in public conversation about what it means to live with multiple sclerosis, all of it signals someone who has found a particular kind of purpose in honesty. Not the performed honesty of a celebrity crisis narrative. The actual kind. The kind that includes the ugly and the uncertain alongside the moments of grace. Ed O'Neill, for his part, has never been someone who performs. His career has been built on a particular quality of presence, an ability to occupy a scene with complete conviction without appearing to try. That quality is not an accident. It comes from someone who decided a long time ago that the real thing is worth more than the approximation. What these two people share, across the distance of years and career trajectories and the enormous fact of Christina's illness, is a commitment to the real thing. A refusal to let the easy version stand in for the true one. And when Christina speaks about Ed O'Neill now, when she talks about what their reunion meant to her and what his continued presence in her life means, she is speaking from inside that commitment. She is saying, here is someone who was there. Here is someone who chose to be there when he did not have to be. Here is someone who saw me at 15 and at 26 and at 52 and who has never once confused any of those versions of me for the whole of who I am. For anyone who has loved someone through the kind of change that illness brings, or who has been loved through it, that statement is not a small one. It is the whole of the thing. And Christina Applegate, who has never been someone who says more than she means, said it clearly. That is the story.